games become infamous for many things, from their graphics to being outstanding, to the difficulty being extremely hard, to their story being outstanding. But some get famous for their gameplay, and today is one such game. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor would have been a throwaway game, a game that people would have said it was good, but I don't really think you should play it, or just one that would have been a hidden gem. But it became famous for one thing, the Nemesis system. What is the Nemesis system? Well, simply, it's a gameplay mechanic where procedurally generated enemies adapt to the player's actions, remember who he is, and try to kill him. Now, this gameplay mechanic has been back in the news because developer Monolith Productions was shut down, and the Nemesis system is kind of locked away for a very, very long time. Now, I've never played both Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, but I've always heard about the Nemesis system. So today, I wanted to look at what was the hype around the Nemesis system. Why did so many people call it one of the most revolutionary mechanics and gameplay stuff that we've ever seen in games? So I'll be looking at the first game, Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. And to answer the question, is Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor worth your time in 2025? Well, before we answer that question, I'm Damien and welcome to Stay Tuned on Gaming, where I decide if games are worth your time. And today, I'll be looking at the infamous Shadow of Mordor. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel, give a like to the video, and comment down below your memories of the Nemesis system and what other games do you think could implement the system if it's ever released by Warner Brothers. Let's get into the game. So let's get into the story of Shadow of Mordor. Now, before I go any further, I have to say I am not well versed in the lore of Lord of the Rings. So I don't know how accurate this is or how they can deviate from the lore. I have watched all the movies. I have not read the books, and I haven't watched Rings of Power. So I can't tell you if it's accurate and which character should be appearing here and who should not be appearing here. All I know about this game going into it is that it's set between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So I'm only going to be talking about the story of the game and how good that story is. So let's get into it. The Shadow of Mordor follows Talion, who's stationed at the Black Gate of Mordor with his family, until they're attacked by the Black Hand of Sauron. His family is murdered, and Talion, who's meant to die, is denied death and is instead resurrected by the spirit of Celebrimbor, a powerful elven smith who has some connection to Sauron. Now Talion, with the Wraith of Celebrimbor, on a dual mission of vengeance. Talion wants vengeance for the Black Hand and the killing of his family, and Celebrimbor wants vengeance on Sauron. It's a simple tale of revenge, and that's really it. I can't really say much about the story. There really isn't anything else except, yeah, they want to go kill these guys that killed them. That's about it. There is some mystery with Celebrimbor because he doesn't have his memory, and you're trying to get his memory back, and trying to figure out what his connection to the One Ring is, and how did he help Sauron, and how did Sauron betray him. It's cool, but again, nothing interesting because the story is so short. The revelations don't really actually hit as much, and because there's really not much character development on everybody in the game, a lot of the times it just kind of be like, oh, okay, cool. The other characters in the game are also not developed at all. Like, most of them are just there to serve as plot points, which is a bit of a shame because I thought they could have done something much more. Like, Talion is pretty boring. Celebrimbor is somewhat interesting because he's just an elf that wants to kill Sauron and doesn't care about anybody else, but mostly it's just a game that's a vehicle for the Nemesis system so that you can play out your many stories that you'll have with your orcs and your rivals there. Otherwise, this story is pretty disappointing. It even ends on a major cliffhanger, which was pretty weird in my opinion, that sets up the sequel game, Shadow of War. So there's really not much to talk about when it comes to story. Gollum does appear at one point in the story, and he's actually quite integral into the plot, but again, nothing here is super crazy. Even the DLC, there's 2 DLCs, one Lord of the Hunt, where you're basically just hunting beasts mostly, and there's nothing there. The second one is a bit more interesting, because you do get to play as Celebrimbor, but it's very short as well. It's only probably like 2 hours, and the story itself is not that long. You can probably beat it in under 12 hours, which is pretty weird overall. I have to say, I was not impressed with the story and was pretty disappointed overall. Graphics wise, the game looks fine and does a good job of representing Mordor, and there's a lot that I really liked about it. There's nothing super bad as well. I will admit that I really liked the look of the orcs. They were the best thing about this game. Like, the different designs that you get, there are so many great designs of orc, each one more memorable than the next, you know, and they each were different, and I think that's the super cool thing about this game. Music wise, there were some good tracks, but nothing stood out to me. Like, nothing I could say is was like, oh my gosh, that's from there, or that really stood out. And voice acting was pretty fine overall. There wasn't really anyone that stood out. So overall in the package, story is disappointing and everything else is probably just fine. Now, let's get into the gameplay. Shadow of Mordor merges Assassin's Creed traversal, Batman Arkham combat, and RPG mechanics, all centered around its crown jewel of the Nemesis system. Now, what is the Nemesis system? I'll get into that a little bit later, but let's just first talk about the combat and in general what I liked about it and what's good about it. First off, I like how the game just drops you in. Like, after a couple of tutorial missions, you're kind of just dropped into the world, and from there you can figure out pretty much what you have to do. I do recommend doing a bit of the story missions so you can get more of the mechanics explained to you, and you can understand a bit more and unlock more abilities quicker than, in the game. So first do a lot of story missions, but I do like how the game just drops you in there. You get to do whatever you want, go on a killing spree, fight all the orcs that you want to fight. There's just so many fun stuff. Now, combat is basically just Batman Arkham Asylum. Seriously, it's a straight copy and paste. Many of the combat stuff in that game is brought over to this game, and so it very much was like feel right at home. But there is a lot of variety. Like, there's a lot more attacks that you can do, a lot more stuff with timing and combo streaks that you can unlock later down the line. You even get an ultimate ability later on. So there's a lot more fun to be had with that kind of style. I also love that you get a lot more enemies in the game as well. So there's a lot of fun you can be had there. Though it's basically just one button to attack and then one button to counter. And then of course you have a whole bunch of other attacks and combos you can do much later down the line that you unlock. You also get a bow and arrow, which allows you to do range attacks. You can use it to do headshots on orcs and basically kill them or pin them down to the ground. And then lastly, you have a dagger, which you can use for stealth attack. Stealth is actually quite a big proponent in the game. Even traversal is also pretty big. Like, traversal is very much just Assassin's Creed, one button to climb up and then one button to jump from one side to another. So yeah, it was actually pretty like copy and paste from a lot of games. But I think what makes a lot of this game so much fun is that it's very arcadey. It's not like serious. None of the mechanics go super in depth. Like, traversal is very simple. The stealth stuff is very simple, but it has a lot of variety. Like, you can do stealth from attacks from above to stealth attack. You can do ledge stealth attacks. You can do from behind stealth attacks. And of course, there's still dominating or stealing energy, so you can get your focus back, which slows down time with your bow and arrow. Again, there's just a lot of variety, and because it feels so arcadey, it feels like the game just manages to take all of those different systems and kind of just makes it fun in a big merging way. Really, really love that about this game. Now, when it comes to stealth, one of the best attacks in the game has to be Shadow Strike, which is basically you point your bow and arrow to somebody in a distance and then you teleport right to them and then attack them. One of the best abilities in the game. Like, traversal as well there's no fall damage, so it makes traversal fun, though you can be jumping around all over the place because it's very, very hard to actually point directly where you want to go. And the bow and arrow, you get to kill so many orcs very easily because you can slow down time when you use your focus ability. It's just really fun. It also has a sense. You also have sense ability. Kind of think of it like the Witcher 3 senses. The screen goes completely dark and then it just highlights all the orcs around you. You'll be making use of this a lot in the game. Overall, all of this is fine, but of course it is packaged with the incredible Nemesis system. Now, what is the Nemesis system? Well, in simple terms, it turns the enemies into unique, evolving rivals who remember your fights and adapt, and everybody wants to kill you. This makes every battle personal and unpredictable. I like to think of it as like those games where you make choices, and in those choices that you make, it affects the game. The game responds to those choices, as well as the characters in that game responds as well. But think of it on a larger scale and with every single enemy in the game that you can interact with, survive. If they survive fights with you, they will remember you. Every single time you meet a captain or a war chief, you get a small introduction and their name. There's so much with the Nemesis system that I have to get into. First of all, let's first talk about the orc army. It has a hierarchy, and there's the basic grunts you'll face. There are captains and elite captains, and finally war chiefs. Now every single captain and war chief has randomized traits, a name, and personality. This makes every encounter deadly and unique. You can be a big guy that has a lot of armor on, and he can be walking with a shield, or he could be covered up in a lot of scars, like he's been burned by acid or something. Maybe he walks around with the gang. Maybe their personalities that he's very confident that he wants to fight you, or he's very skittish and scared. I really love this. There's so much, and the possibilities are endless when it comes to the captains and the war chiefs. Speaking about captains and war chiefs, they're mostly shrouded in mystery. The only way you can get any information on a captain is by dominating a worm orc, which allows you to see their strengths and weaknesses. This is key. The strengths and weaknesses will be the difference between a quick fight or a long fight. Strengths can range from a variety of things. Immune to fire, immune to range attacks. He could be immune to executions. You might not be able to leap over him and try to attack him from behind. There's so many different things. Sometimes you should try to not focus on the strengths, and focus on the weaknesses. The weakness could be he could be weak to fire. He could be weak to you coming in with attacking him with beasts, which you can also make use of in the game. He could be weak to ranged attacks, or my favorite, he could be killed instantly with stealth attacks. There's just so many things. This will change the tide of battle, and you will have to make sure that every fight you have will be tailored to that captain's strengths and weaknesses. And if you run into a captain and don't know his strengths and weakness, well, then you're going to be in a long fight of a guessing game. What is he strong to? What is he weak to? And you'll have to figure that out. Now, war chiefs are the big threat of the game. They're usually the big guys at the top of the hierarchy, and they're hiding in their strongholds, guarded by many grunts and sometimes captains. The only way you can find out any information on them is by actually dominating a captain, and then you'll get their strengths and weaknesses, and they usually have double the strengths and one or two weaknesses, which always makes their fights very tough to do. And of course, there's so many other orcs that are trying to kill you at the same time. Later on in the game, you even gain the ability to dominate captains. This allows captains to fight before you. You can now make this chosen captain rise up the ranks and then become a bodyguard for a war chief. Then when you go fight that war chief, make him turn on that war chief and kill him. You can even make them war chiefs as well. There's just so much you can do with the Nemesis system, and that's what makes it so great. The ability to manipulate and change and control orcs, and how you manipulate this hierarchy system is really, really fun. Couple that with just how much fun you can have with the orcs. You can blow up the fireplace that they're around, shoot down the beast cages so they can be released and actually be attacked by them. It just makes everything so fun. This is why I called it's a choice-based game, because this world is thriving and living, and everything that you do is affected by it. If an orc captain runs away, he'll come back and he'll remember who you are. If an orc captain manages to kill you, then he'll actually notice it and talk about it the next time you meet him. Heck, there's just so much happening that's really, really fun. There are duels that are constantly happening between two orc captains, and you can actually influence who wins. If you want the one with higher power to win, then you can do that. There are ones you can weaken them by maybe jumping in the hunt. You can maybe take down two captains at once if they are in a duel with each other. There's so much you can play around with. Heck, even a grunt who is basically just cannon fodder, if he kills you, he's promoted to captain. He'll get a name, a personality, and he'll become one of your main rivals in the game. It's so cool. So why do you want to hunt these captains, first of all? Well, the first thing is, there are two things. The first is runes. Now, these runes are basically stuff you can add to your weapons, and they'll basically give buffs. Now, you have 3 weapons, like I said. You have a sword, a bow and arrow, and a dagger. Now, if you kill a captain with your sword, you get a sword rune. If you kill them with a bow and arrow, you get a bow and arrow rune, and so on. What's fun is that you can even manipulate this system. Later on, you gain the ability to send death threats to captains, and then you can actually use that ability. Once you send that to them, you gain the ability to get an increased and more rare rune, which is really, really awesome. The second thing you want is for power. Every single war chief and captain has power attached, and you need power to unlock the later tiers of the abilities in the game. Like you said, you have 3 different types of leveling up. First, you have mithril points, which you can use to level up your health, your focus, and how much arrows you can get. Then you have your normal leveling up, which you just do to kill orcs, and normal leveling up to unlock abilities. And then power will unlock the later tiers down the line. So you'll always need power if you want to get to the stronger abilities down the line. And that's really fun. Again, this is all great, and I can see why people fell in love with the Nemesis system. I can see why people want this in other titles, but I can also see how it could be hard for developers to implement this. Like, how would you implement this in like something like Cyberpunk or something like Witcher or Persona or something like that? How would you implement this? Please comment down below and give me some ideas on what you think or how you would implement this in other games, because it feels like Shadow of Mordor is the perfect game for this, and there really is nothing else. And for the first time this was ever made and implemented in the system, it's really awesome and done really well. Now, besides story and Nemesis missions, there are some other stuff to do. You have weapon missions which act as challenges in the game for your various missions, for various weapons. There are like 10 for each weapon, and if you do all of them, you unlock like the master version of these weapons. They're cool, and they're actually some fun. It does break up some of the monotony the game does suffer from. You get slave missions, which is to rescue captured slaves from orcs. You get ancient artifacts that you can find, and this will basically give you like lore drops. So I think those are really cool. And then finally, you have like hunting and plant challenges. So that's really it when it comes to the gameplay. Now, while I love the Nemesis system, and I think it's really awesome, and I think the game has some really fun stuff, it's not perfect. First of all, the Nemesis system is the biggest thing that's amazing about it, and the thing that also hinders the game. Around the end of the game, the Nemesis system kind of just becomes boring. It becomes kind of tedious, and you don't really care for it as much anymore. First, the Nemesis system is not used in story missions, which is very disappointing. Second, the system isn't as spontaneous and unpredictable as I would have loved it to be. You never run into captains in the wild. You always have to find a captain, get his like strengths and weaknesses, and once you choose a target, a mini mission is unlocked for them. So you have to go to that mission point and then hunt them down. It'll be a variety of things, but it quickly like repeats itself when it comes to missions. The worst is the war chiefs. Before you can even take on a war chief, you have to do the mini mission before them. And that mini mission is usually kill his supporters silently or make his supporters scream. They start to repeat after a while, and only then do you unlock the ability to fight the war chief during that time. It's like gets repetitive very quickly. And during the time I played, I only ran into one captain in the wild, which I felt was kind of a missed opportunity. I would have loved if you just started a fight with an orcs, and then so many orcs come and the captain hears about it and he tries to kill you. That would have just been really fun. But they're mostly always in strongholds, so you don't just run into captains in the wild. You do run into a lot of captains in the stronghold, but it sucks that you always have to go to a stronghold if you want to do anything. And you can also kill everybody in the Nemesis, like in the like war table thing, and then there's nobody to do anything with, which kind of becomes pretty annoying. What's also bad is that around the second half of the game, they need you to like take control of all the war chiefs, and once you do that, trying to undo it is very hard to do, which can become very annoying as well. Another thing is that the Nemesis system doesn't evolve on its own, so you have full control of this as well. Whenever you advance time, the Nemesis system will just start to update by itself, meaning those positions that you left over by killing those orcs will be filled by other orcs. Like one will get promoted from a captain to an elite captain, or if you've killed a war chief, that guy that was underneath him will become war chief. But it doesn't evolve on its own. You have to control that, and you can do it in 3 ways. 1, you die. 2, sometimes story missions advance time and actually advance it. And 3 is by advancing time by yourself. The only way you can do this is by unlocking the towers in the game, which acts as fast travel points, and you use that to either fast travel or advance time. I would have wished if the game had like some in-game timer that would have just had the like Nemesis system, the war table, just update by itself. It would have been way more fun to do. And like I said, the game suffers from that because there's just no day and night cycle, so you have to make time go by very self. So you can spend a lot of time in the day and you can spend a lot of time at night, and you don't really want to spend time at night because you run into other enemies down the line, which are just very annoying to deal with. So yeah, there is a lot of repetitiveness in the game. Another thing I felt that just had an issue with is that this game is way too easy. It's really easy. There's no difficulty option you could choose from. I didn't find one, and this game is way easy. Like maybe it's because I've played so many times Batman Arkham Asylum and I know the combat style this game uses, but I only died twice. The first time was by total accident. The second time was because I just really wanted to test what happened in the Nemesis system and try to get more vendetta missions. Otherwise, I hardly ever died in this game. Like, did I get close? Yeah, sure. But the game has a system that if you get close to dying, it does like a last chance survival tactic. Like, you have to move the analog stick into the circle and then push the corresponding button. But you can do that like twice. Otherwise, you hardly ever die in this game, which is a bit of a disappointment because I would have loved if the game was just a little bit harder so that when you do die, you have way more stories with it. Now, this doesn't say that the game is terrible. Like, it's not. They're still good with it. And the Nemesis system makes you have 1,000 stories that will be very different from every other player. While you may have some, like, similarities with other players, most of the time you'll have your own stories to tell about your own orcs that you fight, which is really, really fun. I do still think that the game does have still some fluff. The weapon challenges are fine. The artifacts do provide you with some good lore, but I didn't care for the hunting and plant challenges. They were just not needed in the game. There's like 10 of them in total. It was boring. And then the slave missions are tedious and boring and played out the exact same way. I don't know why they were in the game. There's a lot of them in the game as well. I just wish there was something else. And while the game does have some really cool orcs with some cool personalities, I think the DLC has the better orcs with better personalities as well. Speaking of which, there are DLC. In fact, there are 2 DLCs for the game, Lord of the Hunt, and the second DLC, The Bright Lord. Now first, Lord of the Hunt is you play as Talion, and you kind of make use of the beasts in the game. Now this is something that's in the main game, but not as in depth as it is in Lord of the Hunt. You can do so much more with taking control of multiple beasts, having them fight for you, taking control of the big, like, I think they call them grogs in the game, or whatever they call the big giant beasts in the game. I can't remember it for some reason now. That you can take control of them, which you can't do in the main game. I wish you could have done this in the main game, but that DLC isn't as great. Besides that, it just feels like a smaller version of the main game, and it isn't really that fun overall. It's like very short too. It's only like 2 hours long. The second DLC is a bit better. The Bright Lord DLC has you playing as Celebrimbor, and you're trying to stop Sauron from conquering Mordor and avenging his family. This DLC focuses more on dominating orcs, which is something you can again do in the main game, but here you can do so much more, like have a lot of them with you, have an entire army, and not only that, summon like 5 orcs whenever you want at any given time. There's just so much more fun to have there. I wish it was in the main game, but it isn't. I do like that you get to use the One Ring in this DLC, which is really awesome, and of course you get to do a big boss fight with Sauron at the end. Unlike in the main game, where there's 2 very disappointing boss fights at the end. This weird, like, stealth boss fight that you do around, like, the second last boss fight is a stealth boss fight. It's very bad. It's like, I did it like in 5 minutes. And then the last boss fight isn't even really a boss fight. It's like a QTE. Like, that's what it is. Pretty disappointing. Well, each DLC only lasts 2 hours, so there's really not much when it comes to the DLC itself. Overall, this is a great game, and the gameplay is fantastic. There are things that hold it back, and I do know that its sequel, Shadow of War, I believe, is way better, and it does a lot of the things I might have issues with now. So, yeah. It might not be best, but I will say that the game isn't long. Like, it's pretty short. It's only around 20 hours long, and you can probably, and that was just me like messing around, so you could probably beat the game even quicker than that. I think you could beat this entire game in under 12 hours, probably under 10 hours if you do just the story mode stuff and don't focus on me still trying to do the hunting challenge and the plant challenges and the slave missions. None of that is really needed in the game. Overall, I did have fun with the gameplay.
But the next drop spilled will be all yours. Someone light the signal! Right, you, maggot! Get on your knees before my master, worm! You'll find it's not so unpleasant when you get used to it. Back, you stupid tark! Run up the beacon, you flop! Ranger! Didn't you threaten to make me scream, maggot? I'll show you a thing or two about pain! me!
So the question at the end of the day is Shadow of Mordor worth your time? Well, the answer is yes. I do think this game is worth your time. First of all, it's not too long. Around 20 hours my time was, but you could probably beat this game in under 12 hours. Heck, you could probably beat it under 10 hours, and both DLCs can be beaten in under 4 hours in total. So there's not a lot of time here. There's a lot of fun to be had here, and if you can pick this game up for a cheap price, which it usually is on a cheap price for, then I totally think it's worth your time. But I can also understand you wanting to skip it and going straight to Shadow of War, because I have been told that everything this game does, Shadow of War does better. But I will say, if you want to see the origins of the Nemesis system and you want to see how they implemented it the first time, then I wouldn't say it's bad jumping into this game. There's a lot to like here. I love the combat. I love the orcs. The Nemesis system is great. The story is underwhelming, I will admit that. And the music and voice acting is all fine. But and the stuff that are issues for me, like the plant and hunting challenges, the outcast missions, and some of the other missions in the game, you could totally skip and finish the game in 10 hours. So I do think that there is a lot of fun to be had here, and I do think that this game is worth your time in 2025, because it's just not that long and it's still a fun game overall. Well, that's the video for today, and thanks for watching it. Please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and of course if you want to see me cover its sequel, Shadow of War, which I will be doing very soon, and I'll see you guys in the next game.